All right, take two. Chapter 9.7 is going to revisit systems of equations. The reason I said take two is because these systems are complex enough, I guess you can say, that if you're not careful, you could either do something wrong and not know it, or do something right but think you did it wrong. So I did make a mistake in the first take of this that actually wasn't a mistake, but again, everything just kind of worked out differently. Anyway, what we're going to do though is briefly look at the two types of substitution elimination systems that we had, because that's really the only two options we've learned in algebra so far. In substitution, whenever you can get one variable by itself, in other words, y by itself, it means that what we can do is substitute our y in the other equation with 2x minus 5. So we did the 3x minus parentheses. Again, substituting with parentheses is the safest thing if you do that. Remembering that the negative changes both, you end up with 3x minus 2x plus 5. Again, being careful about that negative equals 9, ending up with x plus 5 equals 9. Then you would subtract 5, get x equals 4. You would then take that x equals 4, plug it back in, get your answer. I guess we can do that here. That would be 2 times 4, which is 8 minus 5, which is 3. And so your answer would be 4, 3. And what that means is that's where those two lines would meet, is at 4.3 or 4, 3. Same thing here. What we learned to do is make our x's meet up by multiplying them by whatever the coefficients are. So we brought the 3 up, brought the 2 down, ended up with 6x plus 9y equals 60. 6x minus 20y equals 2. Switching the bottom row, that goes away. You end up with 29y equals 58, which when you divide by 29, sorry, my writing is terrible, you end up with y equals 2. Again, taking that 2 back up here, you end up with 2x plus 6 equals 20. Again, if y is 2, that's what you end up with. From there, you end up with 2x equals 14, which means in the end that x is 7. And just to do a real quick check, if x was 7, that would be 21. If y is 2, that would be 20. 21 minus 20 is 1, and so we know that we got it right. And I do recommend that anytime you find solutions that you quickly check them with the other equation. So if I use this equation to get my answer, I would always take my values back down here just to make sure it worked. But that was what we learned, I believe, sometime in the first semester. You also learned it a little bit in Algebra 1. Solving in systems of equations can result in anything from 0 to 4 solutions. In most cases, it helps if you can understand what the graphs look like. So you might have an ellipse and an ellipse where they would meet 1, 2, 3, 4 times, so you should find 4 solutions. You could have a circle and a line that could meet in 2 locations. You could have a parabola and an ellipse that meets in 2 locations. There's no telling what you would see. The good news is you don't have to see the image to find the solutions. This was just used to help you understand why there are multiple solutions, because you never know exactly what you're looking at, and different shapes can intersect in different ways. Substitution and elimination still work with the higher level, but it's important that you understand when to use them, because most higher level systems will not stack up nicely. Whereas before we typically used elimination, in this situation you're probably going to use substitution for most of them, just because they don't really work out to be eliminated. For example, and this might be where you want to start copying down your examples here. In this problem, you really can't get x squared and y squared on both top and bottom, because you'd have to do something crazy to get both of these to be squared. So instead what I would do is think, how can I set up substitution? Well, what I can do to set this up is move my 2y over using my algebra experience and turn this into 14 minus 2y. You then would take that x and substitute this here. So you end up with 14 minus 2y squared plus y squared equals 196. You end up with 196. Remember, in this situation, whenever you square it, you multiply and double. So that would be 28 doubled, which is 56 y, and then you square this, so plus 4y squared plus y squared equals 196. The obvious thing I noticed is that you have a 196 on both left and right, which means both of these things are going to cancel. In other words, if you were to subtract 196 from both sides, both of these things would go away, leaving me with 0. But you end up with 5y squared minus 56y equals 0. Now you have to remember how to factor, or how to solve these. And again, factoring this, both of these have a y, so we can take a y off and be left with 5y minus 56 equals 0, which means that one of your answers is 0. and the other one is going to be 56 over 5. And again, the way I know that is because if I imagine solving this, you're going to add it to both sides and divide by 5, which is why it's a positive 56 over 5. And here is your proof. So you can see it. I would move that, making it positive, and then divide, making that 56 over 5. But either way, that's two y's that we now have to deal with, is 0 and that. And so now what we have to do is take these answers and plug them back in. It doesn't matter which one you do, but I say I would always choose the easier one, which means in this case I would choose the bottom one. So in this case it would be x plus, well, if y was 0, and that is y, yes. If y was 0, it'd end up with x plus 0 equals 14, which means that x is 14. So one of those would be 14 comma 0. And if x was 56 over, if y was 56 over 5, this is going to be ugly, but we'll use our calculator. So x plus 2 times 56 over 5 equals 14. 2 times 56 over 5 is going to be x plus, it's going to double that top number to be 100 plus 12, so 112 over 5. I then don't like my fraction, so I'm going to multiply everything by 5 because that's what we learned to do. 5x plus 112 equals 70. Subtract your 112, 5x equals negative 52, I believe, and then you end up with 52 over 5. And again, I don't trust this, but let's just see. So our second solution would be negative 52 over 5. Sorry. Comma 56 over 5. And so let's check it out to see if it works on the other one by plugging that in. So if we plug in 14 squared plus 0 squared, obviously it works. It's 196, which means that it is true. On the other one, if we plug in 52 over 5, so parentheses negative 52 over 5 squared plus parentheses 56 over 5. These are just ugly. Again, you really got to just kind of trust it. And knowing me, I probably messed up. Squared equals, of course I messed up somewhere in there. Okay, let's see. That's y is 56 over 5. Y was 56 over 5. Give me a second to pause this. I don't want to waste your time on this one. Okay, this is me about 3 minutes later looking at all this stuff. I messed up right here when I assumed I knew that 170 minus 112 was 52. It's actually 42, which actually makes it negative 42 over 5, which then if you look at my calculator, negative 42 over 5 squared, 56 over 5 squared is the 196, which means that those are my two solutions. But again, the key thing there is now that you're getting into these higher things, you do want to check it very quickly just to make sure you get it. And at this point in your career, missing that and allowing yourself to miss that is kind of on your side. And you want to kind of learn to find your mistakes. It's not that you won't make mistakes anymore. It's that you got to get better at finding them whenever that happens. This one here is the one that I actually messed up on before. But what I'm going to do is recognize that you have x squared and y squared, which is rare. And so what I'm going to do instead of trying to set it up for substitution is I am going to eliminate my y's, knowing that my y's would meet at 5 and eliminate. So you end up with 5x squared plus 5y squared equals 80. You end up with 25x squared minus 5y squared equals 130. Your y's are ready to go, so you end up with 30x squared equals 210. Of course, dividing by 30, you end up with x is equal to 7. I'm sorry, x squared is equal to 7, which when you square root, remember that you have to have a plus or minus, and square root of 7 is all you get. So those are your two answers, which means now we have to plug that in. But here's the good news about square root of 7 is no matter whether I use positive or negative, if I square it, it's going to be the same thing. So what I'm going to do is choose this one to check it. Of course, when I plug in square root of 7 squared plus y squared equals 16, that's just going to be 7 plus y squared equals 16, which means that y squared is 9, which means that y is plus or minus 3. No need to check the negative 7 squared or negative root 7 because, again, it's going to give me the same thing because negative root 7 squared is going to come out as positive. Same answer. To check it, I do want to make sure that it works down here because what I have now is the fact that root 7 leads to 3 and root 7 also leads to negative 3 because, remember, it's plus or minus. Also on that, negative root 7 leads to 3 and negative root 7 also leads to negative 3. Those are your 4 points, just like I showed you earlier. Those are our values. Again, just kind of checking this real fast. Really all we got to check is 1, because again, -3 and +3 put in for the y is going to square to be positive anyway. So 25 times √7 out squared minus 5 times 3 squared equals 130, which is what I'm looking for. So checking it very briefly with that other one just to make sure everything works out will always guarantee that you know you're on the right track, especially on tests. Whenever you're taking tests, you want to get efficient with your methods so that you have enough time to check without feeling like you're blowing a lot of time. Again, typically substitution is going to be your case, and that is the case here because you notice you have an x all by itself. So what I'm going to do is plug that up there. Y squared plus 7 plus y squared equals 25. Because there's nothing there, it means I can just put my like terms together. 2y squared plus 7 equals 25. Subtracting your 7, you get 2y squared equals 18. You then divide by 2, getting y squared equals 9, and then square rooting, you get plus or minus 3. So we take that plus or minus 3, and once again, using our common sense here, doesn't matter if I use positive or negative, they're both going to square to be just a regular 3 in both situations, so I don't need to check both. Really all I have to do is check one, so I'm just going to check this one. X equals 3 squared plus 7, which would be 9 plus 7 or 16. So two solutions I see are 316 as well as -316. Those are the only y's I have. I'm sorry. 16, 3 and 16, -3. Those are the only y's that I have. And so I don't need to check anything else, but I do want to check it up here real quick. If I plug that 3 in there, that'll be 9 plus 16, which is 25. Again, that'll still be 9 plus 16, which is 25, which tells me everything is where I need it to be. The next one, again, it's pretty obvious once you kind of practice this stuff enough. You have both of these y's set equal to something else, which means for the most part we're just going to take this and plug it up here, ending up with -2x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals, because that's what I'm putting here, x squared minus 4x minus 3. Elephants on the boat, so we want to move everything there. That means that I will end up with 0 equals 3x squared minus x minus 2. Means I'm looking for numbers that multiply to be 6 and subtract to be -1. Those numbers are 2 and 3, with a -3 and a +2. In the end, 3x squared plus 2x minus 3x minus 2 split down the middle, taking off an x. This is why you want to get faster at this stuff, because again, at some point it becomes important. Ending up with 3x plus 2 and x minus 1. This, again, doing this kind of in my head, I'm going to subtract and then divide. It will be a -2/3. This one here is going to just be 1. And so I want to check both of those. Those are both x's, which means we have a -2/3 comma something. And we also have 1 comma something. The way we get that is by plugging it in. So I'm going to do parentheses 1 squared minus 4 times 1 minus 3 equals -6. Oops, wrong one. And then I'm going to try something different here because I don't like typing in 2/3. So here's something that your calculator does. I'm going to type in my -2/3. I'm going to hit the store button. That's what that means. Store into x. And so when you see that, it says put -2/3 in for x, which then it'll say okay, or it'll just say it is -2/3. I'm then going to type in x squared as it is, because that's my -2/3, minus 4x minus 3. You might want to practice that, because that is a skill that you can actually use at some point. I can check 1 here because it's not so bad. So -2 times 1 squared, because I'm checking to make sure this is right, that I get -6. Minus 3 times 1 minus 1 equals, there's my -6. So -1, or the 1 works. But remember that x is still -2/3, so I can also do this, -2x squared minus 3x minus 1, which also gives me my 1/9, which is what I had there. Those answers are correct. But again, what I did was, instead of having to type to 2/3, I simply put the fraction that I wanted. And if you want that out of memory, you could either hit clear, and that would clear everything. But let's say I wanted 1/5 in there. I would type 1/5, arrow out, and store it using STO, which then gives you the arrow. And again, if you hit the X button a few times, you can give it any variable that you want. So if you do have an X and Y, you could store one of those things in Y. Oops, that's not it. And then 1/4, let's put that in for Y. So store into XY equals. And now when you do X plus XY equals, you actually get 9/20, which is your actual answer there. But anyway, that's just something, again, you at some point, if you want to really learn how the tool works, you got to kind of just randomly play with the tool, see how it works, and figure out from there. Anyway, this here again, visibly, substitution. We're going to put this in here, so we end up with x squared plus parentheses x squared minus 4 squared equals 16. Once again, it does help to remember that when you square something, you simply square the first term, which is x to the 4th, multiply and double, so minus 4x, which is minus 8x, and then square this, which is plus 16, equals 16. Once again, you should see 16 on both sides pretty much means that both of these things will cancel, because if I were to subtract 16, it goes away, meaning that I end up with x to the 4th minus 7x squared, because that should be 8x squared, because it was 4x squared double, which is 8x squared. So x to the 4th minus 7x squared equals 0, which therefore means that what we do now is factor off our x squared, being left with x squared minus 7. This obviously is 0 because that's the only number. There is no such thing as positive, negative, 0. But this would give me x equals plus or minus root 7, because again, you would add and then square root. So those are my 3 x's, so I guess this meets 3 times. And then we have to check it. So we take our 0, we plug it in here. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So 0 comma negative 4. And I know you would think, well, what about positive 4? No, because positive 4 is not going to work, since y can't be positive whenever you put that 0 in there. But just to check it out. 0 there, negative 4 squared is 16, which means it works for that. We then take our positive negative root 7, and again, because that's squaring, there's no need to check both, just put in root 7 in there. So y is equal to 7 minus 4, which is 3. So root 7 comma 3, also negative root 7 comma 3. And just to check, if I plug in the 7 there, that is x. If I plug in the 7 there, that's going to turn into 7. 16 minus 7 is 9. And the square root of 9 is 3, so both of those would work. And notice it's not plus or minus 3, because that wouldn't be it. Either way, hopefully you understand now why my standard for you has been so high. If you can learn the process on time, you can walk away from it and learn a higher level of process later on. Your math is going to continue to repeat itself over the next few years, outside of geometry, of course. But this does represent your final lesson for the year. Congrats on all your hard work. Please feel free to talk to me or email about finals, your final grade, or anything else. The more you know, the better you can adjust to your circumstances. Outside of that, I think I've emailed most of the people who should know what their grade is at this point. Don't forget, if you have not gotten 90% on everything, you have to take the test next week. Otherwise, a 0 goes in and affects you that way. That's why I told you all to get your 90, so you wouldn't have to actually worry about that last test. But outside of that, best of luck throughout your upcoming years, and I'll talk to you later. Good luck.